Is Destiny 2 saved? Well, in comparison to this past summer, Destiny is in a much better spot. And I know this may come as a surprise, but since the final shape reveal, I've been very cautious. I've been cautious about Season of the Witch. I've been cautious about Bungie and their promises. But I gotta say, guys, in this very short period of time, essentially since Joe himself, the game director of Destiny 2, came out and personally addressed us, things have been getting better. Somehow, some way, Bungie has flipped community sentiment from below rock bottom to actually the highest it has been, at least in recent memory. However, keep in mind, this story does not begin from just Season of the Witch. To fully understand why things got so bad, we need to turn the clock back to just 6 months earlier. February the 28th, the day Lightfall launched. Now let's be real, the Lightfall campaign is really what began the downward spiral of the Destiny fanbase. Unanimously amongst the community, Lightfall, especially its narrative, was a disappointment. And not just in one way, literally every way. Forgettable characters, missed opportunities, confusing story, a cliffhanger ending that condensed the entire campaign between two halves of a 4-minute cutscene. But despite the campaign being such a letdown, there was still hope for redemption, and that would be the root of Nightmare's raid. This was going to be Bungie's opportunity to wow players and answer the questions that Lightfall failed to resolve. On March the 10th, we entered the Witness's Pyramid ship to fight Nezrak, the final god of pain. He was subsequently beat in 2 hours and 25 minutes. Root of Nightmares was the easiest raid Bungie had ever released. More players beat Nezrak in 48 hours than every other raid combined. Now at the time, this was very controversial, but in retrospect, I think most players can agree the raid experience lost its prestige that day. The challenge for the hardcore player base had all but disappeared. This was only worsened by the fact that 1 month earlier, in the 2022 State of the Game, Bungie affirmed that challenging content was returning to Destiny. This was in response to how power crept the game had become because of our 3.0 subclasses. This set clear expectations that high-end content was finally going to be hard again. But lo and behold, Bungie turned around and converted the pinnacle in-game experience of Destiny into a glorified dungeon with buggy mechanics. For many players, Bungie had broken a promise. The seeds of distrust were starting to take roots. Now, this isn't the first time players were upset with Bungie, not by a long shot. There have been times in the past where Bungie has dropped the ball, but after several solid content releases, the Witch Queen, Season of the Seraph, the last thing we expected was for them to fumble this badly, especially when the end of Destiny's 10-year Light and Darkness saga was just around the corner. However, the community's wrath was abated again by Bungie promises. They would fix the problems that Lightfall had created in the next seasonal content release, which brought us Season of the Deep. Season of the Deep was next on the chopping block. This season had us diving under the methane oceans of Titan to collaborate with Sloan, who miraculously survived the pyramid ship invasion in Beyond Light. Now, that season did have some good offerings. The Ghost of the Deep dungeon was very well made, fishing was a complete surprise, and deep dives were interesting, but none of these had staying power to keep players engaged until the next content drop. The outdated seasonal model lacked any meaningful changes. And as far as cleaning up Lightfall's mess, this came in the form of 13 weekly radio messages that slowly and painfully drip-fed us information that should have just been in the campaign. We also received a cutscene that explained the origins of our arch nemesis, the Witness. And as cool as this was, it was unfortunately too little too late. Lightfall's story was now quote-unquote fixed, but it was 3 months overdue. And at this point, players were just upset that they had to wait this long for 30 minutes of dialogue to finally make sense of Bungie's botched expansion. Which brings us to the breaking point. Destiny's State of the Game on August the 3rd. There were a lot of things that led up to this. PvE players were frustrated with how lackluster seasonal content has felt. PvP players were angry that Bungie abandoned the Crucible. And everyone was pretty upset that Bungie's philosophy toward the game appeared to be overcharge and underdeliver. On August the 3rd, those fears were confirmed. Bungie released an emergency State of the Game. Now, we assumed this was to build hype for the upcoming Final Shape showcase, but that article was one L after another L after another. No new Crucible maps, less armor sets, rest in peace Gambit, and a reiteration of the same broken promise from 6 months earlier. The good old, we're bringing the challenge back to Destiny. It was completely tone deaf, ignoring player sentiment, and the community was justifiably furious. News of this disaster spread like wildfire. We literally had IRL friends who didn't even play Destiny asking to explain what happened that made people so upset. And literally while we were at DCX, I had so many people come up and be like, yo, I love Destiny, but man, things are rough. Is anything gonna get better? Is Destiny gonna get better? Or is this just it? And for the first time in a long time, it truly felt like Destiny Destiny, if it was to continue, would eventually die. And we joke about the Destiny killer all the time, but deep down we all know that the true Destiny killer is Bungie. But then, in Destiny's darkest hour, a glimmer of hope pierced through the darkness. Joe Blackburn, the Destiny 2 game director, posted a 15-minute unscripted video to X, formerly Twitter. Joe sat down with only a few notes on hand and talked to the community directly. He apologized for the State of the Game article. Then he said the words Destiny players only dreamt of hearing, that being a PvP strike team, Crucible map packs, and a free cosmetic set of armor would be coming to us. Bungie was finally going to put their heads down and devote resources to fixing players' biggest complaints with the game, or at least so Joe said. You see, as awesome as all these promises sounded, at the end of the day, they were just promises. It's not to say we didn't trust Joe. This video was a breath of fresh air, but we have already been given promises before. Delivering is a whole different ballgame, one that had proved to be difficult for Bungie pretty much for this entire year, which brings us to now, present day. Just a little over a month after the release of the new season. We've had the Final Shape Showcase, new light subclass supers and aspects, returning Destiny 1 exotics, we're going inside of the Traveler, we're either going to defeat the Witness or the universe ends. Not only was the Final Shape revealed, but Bungie laid out a roadmap for seasonal content post Final Shape. Instead of 4 seasons a year, Bungie will now be making 3 standalone themed episodes a year, jam-packed with even more content and cutscenes for us to enjoy. Now, we don't have enough information to know if we're gonna like the new formats or whether or not we're even gonna like the end of the Light and Darkness saga. All we can do is really judge where we are now, which is Season of the Witch. This season, Eris Morn has been transforming into a hive god, and it is our job to aid her in this process. We have already had amazing weeks of story with cutscenes and impactful moments. The altering of summoning and Savathun Spire activities are fresh and much more interesting with the new deck building system this season is themed around. And I can't understate how refreshing this shift is. Gone are the days of meaningless seasonal vendor upgrades. Now we get buffs that actually mean something and change gameplay. Bungie has claimed for a long time that we would start to see changes to the seasonal model this year, and those changes are finally coming to fruition. We've already had to make multiple guides explaining how to progress the seasonal content, which is a good thing because the content isn't just a cookie cutter copy of the previous season. A couple smaller points I also want to touch on. The strand aspects Bungie added this season are amazing. Granted, so amazing they got disabled. Weave Wall got disabled, then re-enabled, then disabled again, but my god was it fun using it inside of PvP to immediately be able to glaive out of your Weave Walk. This was the first time I really utilized glaive builds inside of PvP. Banner of War though was another aspect that was disabled during contest mode for Crota's End, but it is an amazing aspect. Now personally, I believe abilities need to ship this way. Powerful, fun, maybe even a tad bit broken, because it opens the door to so many new playstyles with new experiences that shake up the sandbox. And I believe this also rings true when you take a look at the seasonal artifacts. Yes, we recently just reviewed Monochromatic Maestro and its stacking capabilities, which by the way, if you haven't checked out that video, that is a juicer, but let's be real. The artifact is a tad bit weak. You get a couple extra buffs, some debuffs to complement your builds. Bungie really wants us to utilize these orbs, but we're kind of just like, whatever, I want to shoot my weapons. At the end of the day, none of these artifact mods are on the level of like Particle Disruption, Breach and Clear, Energy Accelerant, Classy Restoration. Those were crazy. But despite artifacts not being that potent, I love that our aspects came out as potent as they did. And hopefully Bungie doesn't walk them back too much. Now, on the topic of fixing issues, I have to hand it to Bungie's community team. The decisions made this past month has made me feel, as a member of this community, heard. It's like we're talking to an entirely different company here, guys. Recently, we found out that the new Crucible map, Metroplex, was bugged, allowing you to summon Sparrows in-game and Splatter Guardians on the opposing team. Now, after years of bug fixes, Destiny players have been conditioned to expect the map to be taken out of rotation and Sparrows get disabled entirely. Instead, though, Bungie surprised us. They acknowledged the bug and then chose to just leave it in the game for people to enjoy, with the fix being deployed at a later date. Another example, we had double Nightfall rewards come up, and the weapon that was the drop was the Swarm. I don't know about you, but I'm not that crazy about the Swarm, especially for double loot week. On top of that, it's a machine gun that has been in rotation for several seasons. Now, the reason why this was so disappointing is because Warden's Law was reprised this past season, and all of us were very excited to try out that hand cannon. Many people, including us, tweeted at Bungie to change that week's Nightfall reward to Warden's Law, and almost immediately, the loot pool was updated. I'm talking literally that afternoon. Warden's Law was suddenly the new earnable reward for that week at double drop rates. Incredible. Now, what changed? Guys, I think Joe Blackburn actually sat down with the community team a month ago and said, your #1 goal is to create player wins, because that's what has been happening consistently since Season of the Witch launch. Bungie has always said said we're listening, but for the first time ever, it does feel like Bungie is actually listening. Hell, even recently we came across the crafting, which is arguably the craziest bug that has ever happened in Destiny history, which allowed us to take traits from one weapon and apply it to another weapon, merging them together. You want an Ikelos SMG that can also apply poison of Osteostriga? Go right ahead. You want a shotgun that shoots like a sniper rifle with every single pellet? Done. And Bungie's answer to this was, hey, we're working on a fix. Have fun for the time being. Which honestly led to the craziest week of Destiny ever. Like, for real, ever. I have never had an experience like I just had with the crafting. Another reason why we think Bungie is listening is that they actually opened up a Twitter feed asking for folks to express what PvP changes they wanted to see implemented in the future. I know, I still can't believe it. Now, of course, this is to aid their PvP strike team by identifying player pain points so that they can implement real change. We made an entire video condensing down what we believe to be the most important changes, but this is the sort of open communication that I don't think we have ever experienced with Bungie, which brings us to Crota's End. I was already looking at Season of the Witch as being one of the best seasons, but I had said on the record that Crota's End would be terrible for Destiny 2, and that if Bungie brought back Crota's End instead of Wrath of the Machine, it was going to be a fail, considering how laughable of a raid Crota's End was back in D1. It was the equivalent of a dungeon, and no lie, soloing a dungeon in Destiny 2 is harder than soloing Crota's End back in Destiny 1. But on September the 1st, Bungie smashed all expectations that any of us had during contest mode. Not only was it a raid, it was hard, very hard, and you know we like it hard. Each encounter had new mechanics that required every member of your team to perform at their highest level, whether it was just surviving, ad clearing, damage. Crota's End had it all, and each of these skills were required to defeat Crota in the final boss fights. To top it all off, the pass or prize raids, if you wanted to snag the emblem, you needed to beat Crota a second time in challenge mode. Crota's End challenge mode is actually relatively easy compared to normal mode, but that's not why challenge mode was difficult. Unlike its predecessors, Crota's End was a test of endurance. It was like running a marathon. When you reach the halfway point, you've run half of a marathon, which is already an incredible feat. But now you're exhausted, angry with your teammates, and ready to just leave and go to bed. You have to restart and do it all over again. And when you look at the numbers, it adds up. Despite contest mode lasting for 48 hours, percentage completions were less than the King's Fall raid race, which was only 24 hours. And honestly, since the change here to 48 hours, this is the first time that I feel like Bungie is really nailing down where they need to be on the difficulty spectrum. We know this is important, and what we experience now is essentially what we're going to experience in the final shape. And that raid has got to be hard, guys. We are literally going up against the Witness. And when I first found out that Crota's End was going to be the raid for this season, I was so let down. But Bungie has taken the easiest raid, arguably the easiest in-game experiences in Destiny history, and made it one of the most difficult day one raids in Destiny 2. It's a beautiful thing, guys. So what does this mean for the future of Destiny? Well, for starters, this is the fulfillment of Bungie's promise. Challenge has in fact returned to Destiny. The pinnacle in-game experience in Season of the Witch is difficult, and hopefully this trend will continue into the final shape. Joe Blackburn said in an interview after the showcase that Crota's End was Bungie's chance to play with the dials on how difficult a raid could be in preparation for final shape. I do still maintain that Bungie needs to turn those dials up even more for the final shape raid. It needs to be a raid experience none of us will ever forget. Now, realistically, do we believe this will happen? No. But it's this new paradigm that Bungie has created with Crota's End that I love. Make the day one raid as difficult as possible. And whether it's 24 hours, 72 hours, or a week, just beating it during contest mode is a huge accomplishment. So I know this all sounds great, but why is this video titled The Season That Saved Destiny? Well, frankly, guys, it's because Bungie is starting to follow through on their promises that they've made to us. The game has become more difficult, just like Bungie promised. The PvP strike team is collecting player feedback, just like Bungie promised. The seasonal model is changing and becoming more and more interesting, just like Bungie promised. Player trust is the foundation upon which Bungie can successfully tell the story of Destiny. When I think about what made content so lackluster in the past, why Season the Plunder and Lightfall felt so flat, it was mainly because the story felt unimportant. Our actions over the course of 3 months didn't amount to anything meaningful. And yes, there are other factors like the state of PvP, under delivery, microtransactions, and the power level grind, but let's take a look at one of the best seasons in recent memory, Season of the Seraph. We went into this season with very low expectations, but by the end of the season, we were beyond hyped for the next expansion. That was because the story had weight. Things actually happened. The Traveler almost left, Rasputin sacrificed himself to stop Zevur Wrath, and the Witness arrived at Earth with the entire Darkness Armada. We didn't even get an exotic armor that season. Someone called that under delivery, but to us, it didn't really matter because big things actually happen. In Season the Witch, big things are happening. Ares is becoming a hive god that may take the throne of Oryx. Most likely, we are going to kill Zevra Wrath and revive Samather. This is miles better than making a garden for the fallen or forcing Osiris to drink Nescafe. And when I think about Bungie's plans to make 3 larger episodes a year instead of 4 smaller seasons, it all makes sense. It gives the developers breathing room to tell those bigger stories, to take longer strides and create more content that actually matters. We still have a long way to go until the end of the season, but even if things slow down, no one can deny how good the first month has been in comparison to the last several months of drip-fed content. If Bungie needs a blueprint on how to deliver memorable content, there's no better example than Season the Witch. This could very well be the season that saved Destiny. However, we're also using past tense on purpose here because Bungie still has a laundry list of promises they need to follow through on. If they continue to raise the bar, deliver a quality PvP map pack, better incentivize players' time and money spent, leading up to the final shape and beyond, Season the Witch will be remembered as that season that saved the game. But if Bungie chooses to deliver a mediocre story, abandon PvP again, and then underdeliver on the promises they have made to the community, then we'll be right back in the same rut that Destiny players have been stuck in, or at least on and off for the last 10 years. Season the Witch has not fixed all of Destiny's problems, not even close. But what it has done is provide a clear example of how good the game can be when Bungie actually keeps their promises and delivers awesome content. Only time will tell if Destiny's first 10 years will culminate in an unforgettable experience. But for the first time in a long time, guys, I have hope that it just might.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.